We are now 7 weeks into the MLB season. We've got a managerial firing to talk about, but more importantly, we've got 20 more pickups here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hello and welcome, everybody, to the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Erik Halterman flying solo today. A bug has gone around the Boyer household. I'm not sure if it was a cockroach or some conventional illness or something like that, but Ryan is out for the day, which means we have an extra bit of fun today, which is trying to figure out how long I can go before losing my mind talking to myself. So if you're here watching the live stream, please make yourself known. Let me know your thoughts on these players. I would love to feel like I'm not talking to a wall here. But we've got some headlines to start with, as usual, before we get into our players to pick up. And we have a big headline that just came across this morning. The manager of the Baltimore Orioles, Brandon Hyde, has been fired. This is not unexpected in some ways. If you look at the Orioles record, they're sitting 15-28. I think most would have guessed they'd be a lot closer to 28-15 at this point. So this is where you would expect to see a team sit if they're going to fire their manager at this point in the season. So from that sense, wanting to shake things up makes sense. But as Dave points out in the chat here, scapegoat. I think that's the feeling that I'm seeing pretty widespread, and I'm feeling pretty similarly about that Brandon Hyde firing as well. Was it Brandon Hyde who put together this roster? I don't think so. Was it Brandon Hyde who decided to not have enough extra options when all of the pitchers got injured at once? You know, maybe you could say actually the team did have decent pitching depth. It's just all of the pitchers are hurt at the same time, and then also you've got guys like Jordan Westburg missing time, Gunnar Henderson hurt early. There are a lot of reasons that had nothing to do with Brandon Hyde that are behind the Orioles' struggles. I would look much more to the overall roster construction, but sometimes you need a shakeup. This is the easiest way to do a shakeup. We will see, as Brian points out here, they're all playing bad. Maybe a new manager will make them play better just for, you know, the shakeup, the new vibe, something like that. I remember back to the Phillies firing Joe Girardi a few years ago. Girardi wasn't really the problem, but as soon as they got rid of him, everybody just started playing differently. So maybe we'll see that with the Orioles. For fantasy purposes, you wonder about things like, would they change the way they're deploying their relievers? I doubt that's the case. I think Felix Bautista is still a closer under new management. You wonder, maybe could the team run a little more? The Orioles have been, I think, bottom 5 in steals this year, so maybe something to watch. But difficult for Brandon Hyde, not entirely unexpected, but not necessarily something that looks like it's going to immediately turn things around. We've got another big story to talk about in the AL East. That is reports that Christian Campbell is getting some work at first base. He's yet to actually play first base, but this is apparently the Red Sox latest plan to cover for Tristan Casas, who is out for the rest of the year. So far, the first baseman for the Red Sox have been the likes of Romy Gonzalez, who's hurt himself, Abraham Toro, Nick Sogard. So you can see there's a clear hole here. Rafael Devers has made it clear he doesn't want to fill it. I think that's been talked to death at this point. But seeing Christian Campbell get some work there pregame, while also seeing Marcelo Meyer work in at second base in the minors, I think this is significant. I think that we probably should see Meyer before too long. And if you're a league where you want to stash a prospect and he's still stashable, I do think Marcelo Meyer makes sense stashing because of this news. Other headlines to discuss here. We've got with the Phillies, Aaron Nola hitting the IL with a sprained ankle. Now, this is an interesting one because Nola has had a pair of very poor starts, 13 runs allowed in 8 2/3 innings over his last 2 starts. Gave up 9 in 3 2/3 against the Cardinals his last time out. And he's now revealed that before the first of those two starts is when he sprained his ankle. Seems like he just wanted to tough it out for the good of the team, whatever. We can certainly phrase this in a positive way. Nola seems like one of those guys who wants to show up and be available even when he's not at his best. I think that partially contributes to some of the year-to-year inconsistency we see with him. But either he or the team decided that it was too much this time around, so he's going to be gone for 15 days. I would not expect this to be a long absence. And in his place, the Phillies will be calling up Mick Abel, not Andrew Painter yet. He's still maybe, a month, 6 weeks or something away from his recovery from elbow surgery. But Mick Abel was a big prospect. He was drafted in the first round a year before Andrew Painter. Unfortunately, he's shown really poor control for most of his time in the minors. It was double-digit walk rates at every single stop until the very last one. This year, in 8 starts at the AAA level, Mick Abel has got a 9.9% walk rate, which, as long as you refuse to round up, is a single-digit walk rate, the best he's had in his career. Potentially interested in a pitcher who did once have real prospect pedigree and who's making some improvements recently. However, it looks like Abel's going to be up this Sunday and then head right back down. That's already been decided, regardless of how he performs here. It's going to be Taijuan Walker who makes a spot start next week. And I would not pick him up for that spot start because it's going to be in Colorado. So very excited to see what Abel does this Sunday, but I'm not sure I'd really pick him up anywhere because I don't know when his next opportunity will be after this one. One more pitcher injury to talk about in this first segment here. We have Cole Ragans, who exited his start yesterday against the Cardinals Friday with groin tightness is what they're calling it. He got through 5 innings, struck out 7, walked none, but did allow 4 runs on 5 hits. His fastball velocity was down in the 6th inning, and he was taken out quickly after that. As of recording, Ragans has not yet been put on the IL, but I'm thinking back to Hunter Green a week or two ago, who also exited with groin tightness, I believe it was. Maybe they called it a groin strain eventually. If we do wind up seeing that this is a strain for Cole Ragans, expect a short stay on the IL for him at the very least. But I think that's going to do it for our headline section. I want to mention a couple names who were thrown out here, though. We've got, when is Bubba Chandler joining the rotation for the Pirates? I don't think that we have seen recent confirmation there, but we're coming up on right about the time when Paul Skeens came up last year, and we've got Chandler looking pretty good at the minors. He did have one poor start in early May, but he's consistently going at least 5 innings. They haven't yet got him past 5, so maybe they want to get a 6-inning start out of Chandler in the minors, but certainly if he's out there and you have a spot available to stash a pitcher, I think it's a good time to stash a pitcher. And hey, it looks like we just got the news that Cole Ragans has hit the IL. Thank you to Dave Funnell here pointing that out. So one of the names he mentioned here, Noah Cameron, I will be mentioning later this show. Maybe I should mention him earlier, but I'll mention that name now. Noah Cameron going to get a chance now, and maybe will be more than one start or two now that officially Ragans has hit the IL. Other questions here. Time to trade Juan Soto, if that's what's being asked here. I don't think that I would do that. I don't know if we're going to see the best season out of Juan Soto, but I don't think we're going to see anything too far. And I wonder, with the numbers down right now, just not a great time to get the most out of him. Juan Soto hitting .252, which would be the second lowest mark of his career, but 15% strikeout rate is right in line with where he normally is. A .312 expected batting average. Doesn't look like a player who's very different. Looks like a player who's struggling, well, not even really struggling, an .845 OPS, but worse than expectations with his first 6 weeks in a new home after signing a mega contract, a new, more pitcher-friendly home. I think we should expect worse numbers from Juan Soto this season, but I just don't know if it's a great time to trade him. I just don't know if now is the chance where you're going to get everything you want to get. We also had a question here about Noelvi Marte. Any word on when he's going to return? He hit the IL 10 days ago with a grade 2 left oblique strain. So I would imagine that he's not imminently about to return. I see that our return date is soon on him, and I would imagine that's getting pushed back soon. Grade 2 would be more than just a couple weeks, unfortunately, for Noelvi Marte. But let's head to the priority ads today. We've got 5 pitchers and 5 hitters, and I should mention Ryan managed to get his names in here before going on the IL himself. So there will be a few guys on here. Well, I'll try to mention when Ryan put them on here, but I don't entirely know all of his logic. So you can ask him on Twitter. Also tell him you miss him. If you go to @RyanPBoyer, you can ask him why he's suggesting all these players or thank him for his great suggestions. But the first name on today's list is one of mine, and that is Ryan Weathers, who we actually mentioned just a week or two ago, but he wasn't yet eligible to be picked up everywhere at that point. But Ryan Weathers has now been activated from the IL, and if he's out there, and this is your first chance to get Ryan Weathers, I would make him a priority this week. Ryan Weathers is somebody that the fantasy community got pretty excited about during draft season because he was in many ways the ideal sleeper. His overall career numbers weren't very good, which meant you could still get him late in the draft, but he had taken steps forward. Last year, a 3.63 ERA, 118 WHIP are pretty decent. A 22% strikeout rate, about league average, 6.5% walk rate. That's pretty good, as is a 47% ground ball rate last year for Weathers. So it looks like somebody who debuted too soon and then continued to develop. And then we had the news that he had added velocity this spring. So what do you get when you have a guy who's already pretty interesting and then he adds velocity? Well, you get a forearm strain, unfortunately. But Weathers is back from that. He's avoided more serious injuries, and he looked great in his season debut. I got to watch him at Wrigley on Wednesday. Allowed 1 run on just 2 hits and a walk, 5 strikeouts in 5 innings. And they only asked him to go 76 pitches, but that's to be expected, I think, in his first start back. So Ryan Weathers, now that he'll be able to work towards a normal starting workload going forward, would certainly be a priority for me. A question in the chat here comparing him to Colin Ray or Andrew Abbott. That's interesting because those guys haven't disappointed. I guess you could say that those guys in a good matchup I would rather have, but I think matchup aside, I think that I like Ryan Weathers more than both of them. I do think that somebody could push back and say just go with the guys who have been playing well this season, and I wouldn't complain about Ray and Abbott, possibly both, certainly both pitching over their heads, but interesting enough, certainly for deeper leagues. I think Ryan Weathers has more upside than pitchers in that tier, but of course, the injury news could come back, and of course, he's pitching for a team like the Marlins who won't get a lot of wins, so I would take Weathers there, but I don't think I would by a large margin or anything like that. The next name on our list here, this was from Ryan, Zebby Matthews. Now, we also, I believe, have already talked about Zebby Matthews this season, and that's because it looked like he was going to get called up a little over a month ago when Pablo Lopez hit the IL with a hamstring issue. The plan seemed to be that the Twins were going to call up both David Festa and Zebby Matthews, temporarily go with a 6-man rotation. And there was a lot of fantasy interest because people like what they see with Zebby Matthews. But turned out only Festa got the call at that time. Matthews stayed in the minors. But Matthews is expected to get the call Sunday in Milwaukee after Simeon Woods-Richardson was optioned. It is Matthews and not Festa, because Festa is dealing with arm fatigue at the AAA level right now. So Zebby Matthews, potentially the opportunity to actually carve out a place in this rotation and not just make a spot start, because again, this is not an injury. This was a demotion of Simeon Woods-Richardson that created this opportunity. So how good is Zebby Matthews is the question. Well, he had a 6.69 ERA and a 1.65 WHIP last year, so that says not very good. But that came with a 3.78 SIERA, 24% strikeout rate, and a 6% walk rate. That's a combo that's going to work over a longer stretch most of the time. The issue was gave up way too many homers, 2.6 homers per 9. Now, the Twins do have some extreme fly ball pitchers, Joe Ryan or Bailey Ober, who potentially could have some home run problems, but Matthews has kept the ball on the ground fine in the minor, so I don't know if he's going to go that same route. And his minor league numbers last year were excellent. In 97 innings, he had a 31% strikeout rate and a 2% walk rate. He jumped across the highest 3 levels of the minors and ended in the majors last year. So impressive, and we can probably forgive him some of his major league struggles because he was moving so quickly. Interesting thing to note is that the walk rate is up at 7% in 7 minor league starts this year. For somebody who had George Kirby-esque walk rate before, interesting to see that it's now merely good. But I wonder if he's realized that he can't just throw every pitch in the zone against higher level hitting. I wonder if there is something to that. Again, it was a 6% walk rate in the majors, and maybe that'll go up again as he starts to actually try to miss some bats, get some chase outside the zone. Not sure exactly what it'll look like, but I think there's enough talent here that I want to see what Zebby Matthews can do. I also want to see what Clayton Kershaw can do. And I could say that I think we know what Clayton Kershaw can do, but at this point in his career, that's no longer true. But Kershaw is going to make his season debut today against the Angels, and how he does there will certainly affect the bids for him this weekend. Kershaw, I think, was expected to miss even more time this year due to toe and knee surgeries, which kept him out at the start of the season. But he's good to go now, and I think he fits into my general rule with the Dodgers pitchers, which is you want whoever's their 4th or 5th or maybe 6th starter right now, and you want to drop him for the next guy. When they rotate through that position, then you want to drop that guy for the next one after that. You want all of these Dodgers because they're all at least pretty good, and they have great circumstances to pick up wins, decent pitchers park as well. Clayton Kershaw, at minimum, falls into that bucket. The question is he more than that? Now, last year in 7 starts, he looked every bit of his 36 years. 7 starts, 4.50 ERA, 1.50 WHIP, just an 18% strikeout rate for Clayton Kershaw last year. But the thing is, it wasn't a multi-year downturn for him, and that's what gives me pause here. It really was, he was completely dominant in his 20s and then still really good up through age 35. You look at the last 5 years before last year, it was a 2.77 ERA and a 1.00 WHIP, 27.5% strikeout rate. So there's a chance that he can even get halfway back towards that compared to last year. I don't think I would put a very big bid on it because I don't think the Dodgers are going to push him very hard. I just think they want him to be at least good enough to be their 4th starter in the playoffs and to have his arm still attached then. I think that's the real dream. But like we're seeing in the comments here, we got some people saying, I think Kershaw has one last great season, and others saying he's done. So there's going to be some divisive bids this weekend. Certainly his performance tonight will go a long way towards determining just how extreme those bids get. But I think you want Clayton Kershaw, at least for the next few starts, if you can. One final priority pitcher here, Jordan Romano. Now, Ryan put him on the list, I believe, before Jose Alvarado got another save yesterday. Unfortunately, this Phillies bullpen situation is tough to track, but I agree with putting Romano on the list here because until yesterday, I believe Romano had 3 of the Phillies' last 6 saves, and we could say 3 of the last 5 normal saves. There was a 3-inning Taijuan Walker save in there. Romano now, I guess you could say, has 3 of the last 6. Alvarado has 2 of the last 6, and either Matt Strahm or Kirkring, I believe, has that final one. So I guess we can still say Romano is in the lead of the committee right now, ever so slightly. I think it's Alvarado 1B, Romano 1A right now, but next week it could be the 2 in the other order. But the point here, by putting Romano on the list, is to let you know that he has pitched much better than his season numbers of late. If you look at his season-long ERA, it's 7.71, but his last 7 outings, he has 0 earned runs, 0 runs, period, just 3 hits allowed, just 1 walk, and 8 strikeouts. Problem is, as mentioned here, he did not pitch the 9th last night. He pitched the 8th, and then the Phillies took a big lead, and they didn't even start Jose Alvarado to begin the 9th, and then it was Daniel Robert, I believe, who created a new save situation for Alvarado to finish off. So continues to be basically a committee, but Romano is back near the front of it, or maybe even at the front of it. I think that in most deep leagues, probably both Romano and Alvarado are rostable right now, but you'd rather have closers from somebody else's team. Move over to the priority hitters. There was a question about another pitcher in here, but I'm going to get to him in the deep league pitchers soon. Of these priority hitters, I've got Spencer Horwitz for you. Now, Spencer Horwitz, a little bit tricky to figure out what to do with him because he's not that good. He's definitely not a priority in shallower leagues, and there's a chance he's been snapped up in the deeper leagues. But Spencer Horwitz has been out all year, working his way back from an injury he suffered in spring training, a wrist injury. It was just want to make sure I get the wording correct. He got surgery. It was a procedure to address chronic symptoms in his wrist. I don't know exactly what that means. I was trying to look up the details for you, and I have not made myself any smarter there. But Spencer Horwitz missed the first 7 weeks due to wrist issues. Sometimes you worry about that sapping power when a guy comes back, but you didn't really draft Spencer Horwitz for the power. Last year in 97 games, he hit 12 homers, hit 265. Basically, the reason you get Spencer Horwitz is he's fine all around. He's a decent contact hitter with decent power. If you look at some of the underlying numbers, for example, it was an 18% strikeout rate last year with an 8% barrel rate. That's fine. Not great for first base, but it's fine. And he's going to play a lot for the Pirates, and he'll be eligible at both first and second base, which means you can put Spencer Horwitz in the middle or the corner spot. I don't think he's much more than a good filler for your roster, but I do think that he is good filler for your roster. Another hitter, and probably a more exciting one, who is just getting the call this week for the first time, that's Jordan Lawlar, big shortstop prospect for the Diamondbacks. Now, Jordan Lawlar, I'm putting in this priority section because he's a big name, and because certainly in deeper leagues he'll be a priority because he's a bigger name. I don't know for sure if you really need to get Jordan Lawlar in some of those, say, 10-team mixed leagues, because the playing time just might not be there right now. For all the talent that is there, this guy was the 6th overall pick back in the 2021 draft. He's still a top 20 prospect at RotoWire. He used to be even, I believe, a top 5 before dealing with some injuries last year. So a very talented player, but where is he going to play in Arizona? They've got a shortstop already, Geraldo Perdomo, who's having an excellent season. They've signed him to an extension. He's young as well. No need to move him. Ketel Marte at second base is excellent. He's had his injury scares, but he's back from his latest one. Eugenio Suarez, I don't think they're moving him off third base. So it seems like the plan for Jordan Lawlar is just kind of work around in a few spots and maybe start 4 times a week. Now, he's a very talented player, so if he does very well with 4 starts a week, then probably that will soon turn into 5 and then 6. He is not going to be stuck in a part-time role forever if he really hits the ground running, but we just can't guarantee that will happen. So it's tough to say you need him in the shallow leagues until that playing time is there. A difficult one to read. He's a player that I would want to get onto my roster if I had extra spots, but I don't know if he needs to be a priority, because I don't know if he's going to hit the ground running and be amazing right away either. For all the talent that's there, league average-ish strikeout rates coming up through the minors, not all that impressive power numbers. He did have 20 homers in 105 games in 2023, but some hitter-friendly parks there, I believe. He can run. He has steals totals of 39 and 36 in his 2 longest seasons in the minors, but the whole package here might look more like a good utility man in his rookie season, and the playing time might look more like a good utility man as well for Jordan Lawlar. So despite the name value, not a huge priority, just certainly a player to know and a player to try to sneak in if you can afford it. Another priority name here, the other big rookie call-up of the week, is Dalton Rushing. Now, again, we have some real playing time problems with Dalton Rushing. He's a very good prospect. He is, I believe, a top 25 prospect at RotoWire and the second-ranked catching prospect. If Dalton Rushing was in another organization and he just called up, he would be one of the most exciting players to add. I think he's going to be a very good catcher who can hit for some power and some average, kind of vaguely like Will Smith could be the potential here. The problem is Will Smith already plays for the Dodgers, and they can't move one of them to DH because there's that Shohei Ohtani guy you might have heard of, and they can't move him to first base either because Freddie Freeman's there. The playing time available to Dalton Rushing is basically just backup catcher at bats and maybe some playing time in the outfield corners as well. Now, he hasn't had a lot of experience there in the minors, but he has gotten some looks. So what does this mean? A catching prospect who is quite good, but who doesn't have much more than backup catcher playing time. I think that means in a one-catcher league, you just have to completely ignore Dalton Rushing. And in a two-catcher league, you add him, but you be aware that you might only be getting 2 to 3 starts a week, and you might decide to move on if somebody else more interesting comes up. There's going to be a lot of young catchers this season. So Dalton Rushing, definitely a name to know. And maybe if your second catcher is bad, I would make him a priority, figuring, hey, you know what? 2 starts a week of a good hitter is worth something. And what if Will Smith gets hurt? But there's real downside that Dalton Rushing doesn't give you the fantasy value that his name value suggests this year. I've got a couple more priority hitters here for shallower mixed leagues. One of them is Trevor Larnach of the Twins who have won their last 12 games. And Trevor Larnach has been hitting second in most of those recent games. Now, he was batting cleanup earlier in the year, but he's been moved up to second. He's had several multi-hit games recently. If you look at Trevor Larnach's season-long numbers, they are decent. 245 average is nothing special. 7 homers already. I do like the fact that his strikeout rate of 20.5% is the lowest mark of his career. He actually was at 22% last year. That comes after he was well over 30 his first 3 years. So Trevor Larnach now makes more contact. He still hits the ball pretty hard, an 8% barrel rate this year. He was at 10% last year, so some room for growth there as well. But most importantly, if he's playing a ton, batting second for a team that's playing really well right now, I want Trevor Larnach. We got an interesting question here, Larnach or JJ Bleday. JJ Bleday does not really have the power this year, just a 4% barrel rate. They're making contact at a similar clip. JJ Bleday, despite theoretically being faster, only has 1 steal. So I don't know if he's offering much there. And he's batting late in the order. So I think that I would go to Trevor Larnach of that one. Looks like I put the wrong question on the screen there, but I think I'd go Trevor Larnach over JJ Bleday. Not by a wide margin, but I think I would go there. The question that I did throw up on screen by accident, Aaron Nola has me concerned. I'm not confident he returns to form. That is fair. I think that he is going to make the case that his ankle injury is the reason why his recent starts went as poorly as they did. But I do think that Aaron Nola also is 32 years old. And I don't think that we should necessarily ever expect a 32-year-old to definitely get back all the way. I think we should expect them to get, 95% back to where they were. So a difficult one there. One more priority ad for people in shallower leagues. I am going to mention Gavin Sheets here. Now, we mentioned Gavin Sheets early in the season as somebody for deep leagues, but Gavin Sheets recently, I noticed, is starting against lefties as well as righties, and that to me is a signal that more widespread rostership is worth it. I think for guys like Gavin Sheets, who are pretty interesting, but not great, and only platoon guys, you just don't need that in a shallow league unless you've got some special setup where you can, pair him with his platoon partner or something like that. It's just rare that you really care all that much about a platoon guy in a shallower league. But Gavin Sheets, no longer a platoon guy, potentially hitting well enough that he doesn't necessarily look like he deserves to be platoon. He's hitting 291 Now it's taken a 372 BABIP to get him there, but an expected batting average of 265 would still be easily a career high for Gavin Sheets. He is hitting the ball way harder. That's the main difference for him. His hard hit rate over his first 4 seasons as a White Sox was 36%. This year, it's 55% for Gavin Sheets. If you look at average exit velocity, it tells you a similar story. His average exit velocity the first 4 years, 88.4. This year, it's 92.5. Now, this does come with more strikeouts for Sheets. He's up at 26.6% for his career. He's typically down at 21%. But I actually don't mind that much. Here, I think it shows that it's a real change. This is somebody who's trading contact for power. That makes it easier to buy into the increased power sticking around. And also, the increase in strikeouts is not that bad. If this were Gavin Sheets jumping into the 30s in order to access more power, I would say watch out. I think the batting average is going to completely collapse. But that's not the case. 26.6% is a totally fine strikeout rate. So I think Gavin Sheets has played his way into consideration in even those more shallower leagues. I'll move us on to the deep leagues in a minute. Just want to make sure there were no names that I didn't think that I was going to cover later who were mentioned in the chat. I appreciate everybody who's throwing out names in there. I think we'll talk about a handful of those in these next 2 sections now that we're moving on to the deeper league names. Now, where was the question about Logan Henderson? Because he is my top deeper league pitcher ad. And given that he was asked about in the earlier section, maybe Logan Henderson deserves to be a priority ad as well. We had this question here. How would you rank Ryan Weathers, Zebby Matthews, and Logan Henderson? I think I'd go rather Ryan Weathers ahead of Zebby Matthews. And I have Logan Henderson in this section, so I guess he's the third option here. But in terms of how much I like each of them for one of their next starts, I really like Logan Henderson. It's really just concerns about whether or not he actually is around to stay that keep him as a deep league option for me. Logan Henderson, if you look at his numbers in the minors, almost all of them are excellent. Take a look. Last year, a 3.32 ERA and an 0.91 WHIP with a 33% strikeout rate. In 2023, he had a 2.75 ERA and a 0.97 WHIP and a 35% strikeout rate. This is a really good pitcher. Now, the thing is, the innings totals are not high for Logan Henderson. He had 81 1/3 last year and 78 2/3 the year before that. So what do you get with a player who has really good numbers on a per start basis, but doesn't give you a whole lot of starts? To me, that's a player you want in the majors now because you're just not sure how long he's going to hold up. Now, the way they've actually managed Logan Henderson has been interesting. He was first called up on April 15th, and then he just kind of sat around for 5 days before he made his debut. And then he was immediately optioned, despite the fact that his debut was excellent. Struck out 9 in 6 innings, allowed just 1 run on 3 hits. And then he was back in the minors, had to wait for about 3 weeks. He was called up again, had another excellent start. Struck out 7, allowed just 2 runs on 4 hits against the Guardians. And again, we don't know for sure about Logan Henderson's future. We don't know for sure that he's still around next week. Currently, we do have him tentatively lined up to start against Baltimore on Tuesday, and I think he should be able to stick around. But the thing with the Brewers is they've already had 10 different guys make a start. They've been incredibly beaten up by injuries in the rotation this season. And a lot of the guys they filled in with have been okay at times. So it's just really difficult to read, when the next guy gets back. I can't say for sure that it's not going to be Logan Henderson who heads back down, but I do really like the talent. There was a good question here. Do 2-pitch pitchers concern you? And he's basically been 2-pitch, fastball, changeup, 5% cutters here. That is fair. I think we've seen, say, Ben Brown be up and down because he's strictly a 2-pitch guy. Ben Brown is less than 5% of anything else. We're at least seeing it looks like 5% cutters for Logan Henderson. Definitely is a factor, but if you've been able to produce the numbers he's produced in the minors with just 2 pitches, I mean, you're not a nobody, I think. So generally with 2-pitch pitchers, I view them as more fragile. If it starts to go wrong, I am more worried that it's just going to go permanently wrong and the guy will head to the bullpen. But, we're seeing even with the likes of Ben Brown, somebody who is a 2-pitch guy who had a rocky start to the season. The Cubs could have had all the motivation they wanted to just say, all right, you pitch like a reliever. We're just going to move you to the bullpen. And they didn't do that. And Ben Brown has bounced back with mostly pretty good starts. He had 1 of his last 6 was bad, but the other 5 were quite solid, 3.60 ERA over those last 6. And I think we could see something similar with Logan Henderson. Basically, if you're a 2-pitch guy and you lose 1 of the pitches, then you're really in trouble for that start. But that doesn't mean that you're going to lose that pitch for the next start. I see it's mentioned here that Henderson does technically have 5 pitches. That's true. He's only really using 2 of them so far. His cutter, his sinker, and his slider are all at under 5% usage through 2 starts. So I guess that's another complicating factor here. We don't even really know what the repertoire will look like. But I would count it as a real concern, but not a major concern, is how I tend to view that. Here, my next starter here, Noah Cameron, who was talked about earlier in the news section and who I said maybe I should move him into the priority ads section because initially it looked like Noah Cameron might only be getting a spot start. We've got a couple of injured Royals pitchers. We had Cole Reagans, who we mentioned the groin issue that has in fact sent him to the IL. We also have Seth Lugo, who was dealing with finger inflammation. It was just going to be a skip start for him. That's why Noah Cameron was getting his chance, but Lugo officially on the IL as well. So I think that means we can count at least 2 starts for Noah Cameron, right? Maybe 3. And that's enough to have some more interest in him. He is somebody that I know Jason Collette has been talking about since the offseason because he was the clear next man up for the Royals and because he was pretty good. Not an elite pitching prospect, but a real one. In his 7 starts in the minors this year, Noah Cameron, 3.31 ERA, 1.13 WHIP, a 29% strikeout rate. Does have a walk rate just shy of 10%, though. But that doesn't seem to be a long-lasting problem for him. You look at his numbers in the minors the last couple years, strikeout rates around 28%, walk rates around 7.5. So this looks like, to me, a pretty good pitcher who's got a shot at holding down a 4th starter spot for a long time. And, if he pitches well in these 2 or 3 starts, does he have a path to stick around? That's really the question that I think will determine how big the bid should be, along with how does he look in this start today. He was promoted just today to start against the Cardinals. You might remember Noah Cameron's first start of the year where he carried a no-hitter into the 7th inning. But was it a good start? He didn't allow a run. He only allowed 1 hit, but he also walked 5 and struck out just 3. Never entirely sure how to interpret those. So I want to see what he does tonight. But assuming he looks at all decent, if we think he's going to get at least 2-3 starts to prove that he deserves to stick around, Noah Cameron's next quest will be beating out Michael Lorenzen, probably. That's not the easiest 5th starter to beat out, but it's not the hardest either. I will say Lorenzen has a 3.76 ERA this year, so hasn't done anything to lose the job, but there's definitely potential here for Noah Cameron to spend 4+ months in the rotation. Got another starter here for you. Slade Ciccone for Cleveland is getting an opportunity today. Now, I don't know. Is Slade Ciccone going to stick around? He is returning technically from an oblique injury. He suffered that in mid-March, and that meant he didn't get to start the year in the rotation. But would he have started the year in the rotation? Maybe. Luis Ortiz, Logan Allen sitting in the 4 and 5 spots, but there is potentially a longer-term opening here with Ben Lively landing on the IL with a flexor strain. So that's enough of an opening here for Ciccone to possibly take this job and run with it. Now, is he going to do that? I don't know. I don't know how good Slade Ciccone is. In 77 innings at the major league level last year for Arizona, a 6.66 ERA, a 1.42 whip, struck out just 19% of opposing batters. So he needs to be a lot better than that if he's to be actually interesting. But Cleveland has a pretty good reputation for what they do with their pitchers. Now I should mention, do we trust Gavin Williams was a question here. I don't know at what point we start questioning whether or not the Cleveland pitching factory actually is a pitching factory. If Gavin Williams not entirely taking steps forward, Tristan McKenzie, of course, broke over the last couple years. Tanner Bybee is developing, but I don't know if he's a superstar yet. I wonder if we're starting to rethink that a little bit, and if part of the appeal with Ciccone was, hey, he's a Guardian now. We like Guardians pitchers. I might hold back a tiny bit there. I should also note his rehab outings weren't all that impressive, a 4.85 ERA, just a 20% strikeout rate. But there was minor buzz about Slade Ciccone heading into the year, and now that he's making his season debut, I think he deserves another mention. If that season debut does go well, I think you'll see some more bids. He'll be going today against the Reds. Let's look at some relievers here. Ryan put on Robert Garcia, somebody that I know he's been on since the offseason, I believe, in this Rangers bullpen. This is with Luke Jackson dealing with a hand issue. He was hit by a comebacker a few days ago. Robert Garcia is the name that Ryan threw on here. It's actually Sean Armstrong who got some saves, but then he also gave up 4 runs last night to raise his season ERA to 4.82. Sean Armstrong, I would say, does not have very closer-like numbers this year. Maybe he's the guy to go to just because he got the saves in the last couple days. But Robert Garcia, maybe a more interesting name in isolation, has a 1.47 ERA, an 0.93 whip on the year, striking out 25% of opposing batters while walking 7%. Pretty good numbers from the lefty if there is to be a change in the Rangers' 9th inning. Garcia certainly has a chance. Armstrong has a chance, but I really am not impressed by his numbers. I do think, though, that we could see a change here because Luke Jackson, a 5.54 ERA, 1.54 whip on the season, 21% strikeout rate against a 12% walk rate. This just doesn't look like a closer to me. I don't think it looked like a closer to anybody before Luke Jackson got the job. So keep an eye on Robert Garcia, maybe as the most talented arm. Also keep an eye on Sean Armstrong because he's getting the chances there. Another reliever to look at is Jesus Tinoco, also put on here by Ryan. Jesus Tinoco of the Marlins, somebody who seems to be moving to the closer role. 2 of his last 3 outings were saves. So I think that this is the Marlins reliever to own if you're going to own a Marlins reliever. Problem is, it's a 4.61 ERA, a 1.24 whip. He's striking out just 16% of opposing batters while walking 10.5%. Now, these are reliever numbers, so just 1 or 2 bad outings will send them all out of whack. But I don't really know if we could say, look, if you ignore his first 2, he's been much better because the bad outings have been scattered throughout for Jesus Tinoco. He had interesting enough numbers last year, though, a 3.32 ERA and an 0.96 whip split across 3 teams. And he's getting the options now. So if you need saves, Jesus Tinoco, I think the guy to go there. I'm going to throw out one more name here in these deep league pitcher ads. That's Logan Evans. I'm not totally sure what to do with this one, but with injuries striking the Seattle rotation, we've got Emerson Hancock and Logan Evans looking perhaps safer to stick around a little bit longer here. And if I'm going to take one, I mean, George Kirby's coming back soon. Logan Gilbert is just throwing bullpens, though. Bryce Miller only recently hit the IL and was shut down with inflammation. So at least one of these guys should be able to stick around. Hancock really has struggled. But Logan Evans, it was good in his last start, I believe. Logan Evans, 6 scoreless against the Padres last night. Only struck out 3, walked 1. And if you look at his overall numbers, it's only a 15% strikeout rate. That's the real problem here. Mostly if he's somebody who had fringe prospect pedigree and is looking a little bit better than Emerson Hancock, and gets the chance to pitch in Seattle in half his starts. If you're in a deeper league, I think I'd be more interested in Evans than Hancock, and I think that there's a chance Evans is still starting in a month or two, and there I think you probably want about half of his starts if that happens. We got a point here about Robert Garcia saying if he wasn't a lefty, he would be the closer in Texas. I think that's probably true. I think that definitely being a lefty hurts him there. I think that he looked more interesting than Luke Jackson heading into the year. Can't know for sure what was going on inside the manager's head, but certainly being a lefty counts against him, and maybe it will continue to count against him. We will see. Let's go to the final section of today's show. That is Deep League Hitter Ads. And I'm going to go with another call-up here, but unfortunately he has to be in this section. That is Moises Ballesteros, a catching prospect of the Cubs. We already had Dalton Rushing in the priority ads, and that's because Dalton Rushing should at least have a clear path to stick around on the roster in some capacity. Ballesteros, while he will give you catcher eligibility while he's up with the Cubs, I don't think he's up to be a catcher. Both Carson Kelly and Miguel Amaya are playing quite well this year, and there doesn't seem to be a need to boot either of them to create backup catcher playing time for Ballesteros. The only reason he's up now is that Ian Happ has been placed on the IL with a oblique strain. That means Seiya Suzuki's moving out to the outfield, and Ballesteros is taking the DH at bats, at least against righties, that had belonged to Suzuki. So I would add Ballesteros in a deep two-catcher league, but I would plan on dropping him whenever Ian Happ comes back, so you can't put a big bid here. But Ballesteros is somebody who has a really good hit tool. He was striking out just 11% of the time at AAA this year as a 21-year-old. Also hit 4 homers. Didn't have big power, but did have 19 homers in 124 games last year. There's something kind of Alejandro Kirk-ish to his profile. Certainly in a physical appearance, a rather round catcher. Also somebody who, like Kirk, might not be a catcher. Although with Kirk, we've seen some real development. I think there's not much question that he's sticking behind the plate at this point. With Ballesteros, that development could be ahead of him, or he could just settle in as a DH. I think he has the bat to do so, and I think I want him in my catcher spot for the next 2 weeks. But again, I don't think he's going to stick around. I mean, if he hits really, really well, they'll maybe try to carve out a bench spot for him. But as a third catcher / DH on a team that already has Ian Happ, Pete Crow Armstrong, Kyle Tucker taking everyday outfield at bats and nowhere else to put, say, a Suzuki, but DH, there's just not a spot for Ballesteros. So I like the player, certainly a name to know. It's just his fantasy value will expire in about 2 weeks. I've seen some other Cubs talk in here. I know it's not hitters, but a question about Drew Pomerantz. Also a mention of Porter Hodge with Ryan Presley really not pitching well. Hodge, I would expect, has the next opportunity here, but Drew Pomerantz is a name to know in those deep leagues. Somebody who had been out of the league for several years, actually last pitched in the majors in 2021. He's battled plenty of injuries in his career, but Drew Pomerantz made it back to the big leagues with the Cubs this year, and in 9 relief appearances, he's yet to allow a run, has a 0.46 whip, 29% strikeout rate against a 6.5% walk rate. He does actually have 1 save already as well when Hodge was unavailable, I believe. If this is full-blown committee, you could see Hodge as the top righty, Pomerantz as the top lefty. There also is probably a world where Pomerantz decides that he's the closer because he pitches well enough for it, and we know the Cubs have struggled in the late innings. I wouldn't say it's the expectation, but I do think it's definitely a possibility. So a name to know there for sure. Another name to know here. Now, this is somebody who was mentioned much earlier in the chat, if I can find it. So maybe I should have had him as a priority ad, but Addison Barger of the Blue Jays. This is a name that Ryan threw on here, and I fully agree. Addison Barger did not make the Blue Jays opening day roster, but he got called up in mid-April, and he's getting his chances now. Due to the injury to Andres Jimenez. It's been Ernie Clement mostly sliding over to second, Barger playing third. Barger has also played the outfield corners in his career, so he has multiple paths to stay in the lineup once Jimenez gets healthy, which is crucial here. Basically, if Barger hits, I think he's going to play somewhere. Maybe it'll be in the infield. Maybe it'll be in left field over, say, Nathan Lukes or something like that. And Barger has hit so far, at least well enough. He's hitting only 250, but the underlying numbers, the batted ball data is really promising for Addison Barger. Should mention it's only 74 plate appearances because, again, he was not in the majors the first couple of weeks, but a 300 XBA for Addison Barger because he has a 15% barrel rate, a 52% hard hit rate, and it's not like he's swinging out of his shoes either. He's not striking out, just a 19% strikeout rate. So when I see all those underlying numbers, I think this is a guy who really has some talent at the plate. Now, this is not a major prospect, and is not somebody who's produced incredible numbers in the minors, so I don't think we should get carried away here, but I do like the underlying numbers for Addison Barger. There's enough in his bat. There's also playing time right now. I think that should be enough for an ad for Addison Barger in a whole lot of leagues. One more guy to go to here, Brett Baty. Man, I didn't think I'd be talking about Brett Baty again. I thought that when he came up at the start of this year, I and everyone else was saying, all right, we'll give Brett Baty one more chance. And then he lost his chance, didn't he? He was booted back to the minors in late April. But he's back again, and since he's returned, he's hit 4 homers in just 20 plate appearances. So we got to talk Brett Baty again. Maybe last chance was his second last chance, and this is the actual last chance for Brett Baty. One thing I did note, even as he was being sent down, is that his bat speed is up this year, and his power looks really good for Brett Baty. A 15% barrel rate, a 46% hard hit rate. He's also pounding it into the ground less than he used to. He had a ground ball rate over 50% in his first 3 partial stints in the majors. This year, 45% ground ball rate. I mean, that's not great, but it's better. Step in the right direction for Baty. If he's going to keep hitting the ball hard, then it might not matter that his plate discipline is terrible. But I should mention his plate discipline is terrible. A 29.5% strikeout rate to go with a 4% walk rate for Baty. That can't continue. But he's hitting the ball hard enough that I think we need to give Brett Baty one more look, especially because he now, I believe, is eligible at second and third base in most leagues. Somebody you can just slot into your middle and corner spot will give you a bit of power. People often talk about it being harder to find power than speed on the wire. So if Brett Baty's out there, I guess we take a look at him again. I don't want to convey too much confidence here, but I think you can look at Brett Baty at least one more time. Now we've got Ryan's final name on the list here, and that is Will Benson of the Reds. I wasn't sure we'd be talking Will Benson again. I was excited about him heading into last year. Somebody who had, back in 2023, a good barrel rate, 10%, way too many strikeouts at 31%, but also had some speed, stole 19 bases in 108 games. And so a player like that who has a lot of everything except for the ability to make contact, that's a player I like because, hey, what if he starts making contact? Suddenly we got a really good player all around. That didn't happen with Will Benson last year at all. The strikeout rate shot up to just shy of 40%. And he only hit 187. So if you were completely out on Will Benson after that point, I get it. I was basically completely out on him too. And I guess, to be fair, the Reds were basically completely out on Will Benson. He opened the year in the minors. He was called up for just a few days in mid-April, went right back to the minors. But Benson has gotten the call about a week ago. He is playing against every righty these days, and he's playing well. He's hitting 318. He's only striking out 24% of the time through his first 7 games, and he has 2 homers and a steal. So Will Benson, a power speed guy who never made enough contact. I don't think I'm changing my long-term outlook on Will Benson. I'll note that he struck out 29% of the time in AAA this year. I think he's still basically the same guy, but the same guy probably means a very streaky power speed option who is useful in deep leagues when he's making enough contact like he is right now. So the playing time is there. currently for Will Benson. The performance is there currently for Will Benson. So sure, get him now, but keep an eye on the strikeout rate in particular. Get rid of him if he no longer deserves to play. There's a good comment here from Eddie in the chat saying the thing I don't like about Cincinnati is they play too many guys. That's true, but Benson right now playing every day, at least against the righties, is at both center field and right. Generally, teams that play too many guys, usually they're doing that because they don't have 9 guys they trust. They have 11 or 12 guys that they kind of trust. And if you're one of the guys who deserves to play every day on a team that has too many players, usually you can spend multiple weeks at a time playing every day, and then you go back to playing not often enough when you're not playing well. It's very often that the playing time concerns and the performance concerns actually end up sorting themselves out at the same time. But it's certainly something worth considering there with Will Benson. One more deep league name for you, not the most exciting one to end it on, but Lenyn Sosa of the White Sox gets you a lot of playing time, gets you eligibility at both second base and third base, and that's probably enough for deep leagues. If you get somebody playing basically every day, you wish he was playing more towards the top of the lineup, but he's settling in as the number 6 hitter recently, and he's got 4 multi-hit games in his last 6, does Lenyn Sosa. It's really just the playing time that you care about here. He'll give you a decent enough batting average. He's hitting .267 this season, league average strikeout rate as he typically does. And actually, he hits the ball respectably hard as well, too. Lenyn Sosa for his career, 39.5% hard hit rate. He's at 39.7 right now for his career, a 7% barrel rate. Right now he's at 7.8. So actually pretty respectable quality and quantity of contact for Lenyn Sosa. Can't really take a walk, but I'll take a decent batting average, some power. Only has 1 steal, only 4 career steals in 733 plate appearances. So I wouldn't expect a lot of speed, but something in all 4 other categories, along with everyday playing time, probably enough for Lenyn Sosa there. And that's going to be all my names. Just taking a look at some of these final few questions here. Barger or Larnach moving forward in the last outfield spot? I think I'd go Larnach. I think just a longer track record playing or batting second is pretty crucial on a team that's hitting well right now. So I think I'd go Larnach, but I do like Barger as a talent, somebody to know there. Also a question about some catchers here. Hunter Goodman, Carson Kelly, or Drake Baldwin. I'm mentioning this one because I wanted to work Drake Baldwin in there. I'm just not totally sure what leagues to grab him in where he hasn't been grabbed already. I think in the 2-catcher leagues, people are probably still holding on to him. The question is Drake Baldwin worth picking up in these 1-catcher leagues? And that's a really tough question because even though he's hitting very well right now, and for the whole season, he's got a 981 OPS, does Drake Baldwin, still basically alternating starts with Sean Murphy. So I think if you're in a 10 to 12 team 1-catcher league, I think that the other guys, I think Hunter Goodman playing more than that and getting to call Coors Field home, I think I'd prefer him. I can understand taking Baldwin over Kelly, though, because Carson Kelly, I think we all knew that he was just on a crazy heater that was due to end at any point. I don't think Carson Kelly's numbers since the incredible what he hit for the cycle, he had several incredible games in a row. I don't think recently he's been all that special. So I think that I'd go Hunter Goodman out of that group, and then probably Baldwin, and then Kelly. But thank you, everybody who hung out in the chat today, kept me company. I don't think that I have completely lost it, which is honestly unexpected. Looking forward to having a co-host next week, although Ryan's actually going on vacation for the next couple, so you won't hear from him for a couple weeks. I will be with Jake Hallisker next week, and then 2 weeks from now, both Ryan and I will be gone. So it'll be a little bit of shuffling things around here on the Saturday edition. But thanks again, everybody, for hanging out. And we'll be back tomorrow here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. And remember, you can go to rotowire.com and enter promo code ROTO15 to get 15% off any RotoWire product. We'll be back tomorrow.